maintain the status quo. But one of the things that Kwame Ture talks about in that speech is he uses a Marxist analysis. And I don't want to privilege Marx, but we can use Marxist analysis in some cases, in some instances. And one of the things Marx talks about is that if we are going to get liberated, certain people in the bourgeois class have to commit class betrayal. And these schools, like he could have easily just went to Bronx Science and then been a bourgeois Negro and went to college, went to Howard with a lot of other people that he and many others were critical of for being bourgeois Negroes. He could have just went that route and not did all the work that he did to try to overthrow and replace the system. But I think it's important that we look for examples like that of people that did go to these elite high schools and use these elite high schools to gain knowledge and gain information and gain critical thinking and then use it against those systems as opposed to use it to just assimilate into those systems. And I saw a connection to Dr. Willis Huggins, who was an elder scholar and an elder actually, or an old head of the late Dr. John Henry Clark, and also John G. Jackson, who wrote Introduction to African Civilizations, because Willis Huggins was actually born in Selma, Alabama. He migrates to New York also. He's before Kwame Ture's time, but migrates to New York as well. He didn't also go to Bronx Science, but he went to Stuyvesant High School in Manhattan. Stuyvesant High School in Manhattan, another type of school, just like, similar part elite, taking, the good blacks, the smart blacks, and try to educate them and get them to be the black face of white power. Another one of those types of schools. But he was a Pan-Africanist. He actually, in 1935, he becomes the executive director of the International Council of the Friends of Ethiopia in response to Italy, fascist Italy, Benito Mussolini and them bombing Ethiopia. So, and he's in New York. He becomes that. He becomes leader of that. Let's fast forward to 1960. 1960, Kwame Ture enrolls at Howard University in Washington, D.C. He was in D.C. Attending a protest. He met some Howard students. He started up a conversation with them. He finds out that they're protesting HUAC, the House Un-American Activities Committee, who at the time was attacking Paul Robeson very heavily. Paul Robeson is a Pan-Africanist. Paul Robeson was involved in WASU, which is described in this book. WASU is the West African Students Union, which is housed in London. Paul Robeson is a part of it. Later, Kwame Nkrumah is a part of WASU. A lot of people come through WASU. It was also documented in this text that Marcus Garvey gave funds to WASU for the house that they utilized in London. And that's another, also WASU led by a brother named Ladipo Solanke, a continental African, I believe from South Africa, I believe. Well, Azania, I like to call it Azania. So that's important. So he's at Howard. He's taught by Toni Morrison. Toni Morrison later is the editor of the book he co-writes along with Charles V. Hamilton, Black Power, important text. So he's surrounded by these types of people. Also becomes friends with Cleveland Sellers. Cleveland Sellers, one of the people that was incarcerated during the Orangeburg massacre in South Carolina. He's networking and making connections with these types of people. And a lot of they're also critical again of, as they would say, the bourgeois blacks on campus that are trying to just fit in and assimilate. A question I have, I guess this is some semi-related, how Cleveland Sellers and doing the work that he did with SNCC and with Kwame Ture, his son Bakari Sellers, I kind of wonder why such an ardent supporter of Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party. Just a question I have, maybe for another presentation, but. Let's move on. SNCC, his involvement in SNCC. He's probably most famously known for his involvement in SNCC as a SNCC worker and then later as the chairman of SNCC toward the end. SNCC was created by Ella Baker, which is very important. And also Fannie Lou Hamer is very instrumental in the work they were doing in Mississippi. Also, if we talk about Fannie Lou Hamer, we have to consider the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. I think that's a very Pan-Africanist thing, because Pan-Africanism is about control of our communities, politically, economically, culturally, socially, spiritually. And the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party is an act of trying to assert political control of their community, right? So of course, they go to the Democratic Convention, and Lyndon B. Johnson, while she's speaking, tells all the television networks to black her out so the public can't see her talk anyway. That's still, when people think, Lyndon B. Johnson was our friend, he signed the Civil Rights Act and all that, we have to understand political expediency we have to understand, again, interest convergence. We have to understand, okay, well, maybe if he doesn't sign the Voting Rights Act, maybe black people won't start voting for the Democratic Party. And maybe the whites don't have as much power. So we got to think about these things. And be careful when we start to think people are our friends, when they may not be our friends. We got to be critical. What else? So other SNCC members, such as Bob Moses, who's known for the Algebra Project. He also wrote a book called Radical Equations, along with another SNCC member, Charles Cobb. Marion Barry was also a member of SNCC, was his first boss in SNCC. Differences in ideology. Also, John Lewis. John Lewis was a SNCC member. But John Lewis was a adamant integrationist. Kwame Ture not so much. So they had their issues. And again, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but it brings, since we talk about John Lewis and them, kind of butting heads, it kind of gets to the issue of like, what are we fighting for? So I'm gonna make a kind of peculiar comparison by connecting Pan-Africanism to the color purple, specifically Oprah Winfrey's character Sophia. And we know the famous scene when she's talking to Miss Sealy after she beat up Harpo, and she said, all my life I had to fight, right? As Africans in America, we have always had to fight, right? In the Battle of the Bullet, Malcolm X said that if you are black, you were born in jail. The circumstances under which we were born into this country require that we fight. Now, the devil is in the details, though. We can either fight to be African, or we can fight to be American. Again, historically in America, there have been always these two strains of thought within our community. And they're more popularly termed integrationism or nationalism, right? But as King quoted, America is a burning house. So historically, when we have fought to be African, more of us, the white power structure has conceded and enticed us with the notion of being American in order to prevent our identification with Africa. Because again, Pan-Africanism is about also mainly an identification with a landmass. And this is something else that Malcolm X talked about a whole lot. You can't have a revolution without, revolutions are about land. A true revolution is about land. So when you start saying, okay, we want to be African, then that links us to a landmass, the most valuable landmass in the world, and it's ours anyway. So that's something that I think we need to think about. Let me see. And again, the essential aspect of Pan-Africanism, the connection to the African continent politically, economically, culturally, and spiritually. So if we decide to fight to be African and connect to the land of Africans, then what that means is, we have to be honest here, the Europeans, Asians, and Arabs that are currently and have been stealing that land, and the people as well, will be unable to steal it so easily, because we'll take control of it, right? So this reverses the progress of the white supremacy initiative if we reclaim our African culture and heritage, right? Again, back to that period of him being involved in SNCC. We have revisionist historians that will not, of course, when I started studying Kwame Ture, I would have never known that he was connected to King, because at that point in my life, I'm still thinking about, when I think of King, I'm thinking of 1963 and I Have a Dream, because I hadn't yet studied King yet. When you start to study King, you see that King is not who they presented King to be. And then with that, you study Kwame Ture, you say, okay, well, King was Kwame Ture's old head, basically, right? So, but they'll never have that, because you can't have the man that's known for saying black power and putting up the fist, and they wanted to blame for cities burning down, connected to the sanitized, McDonaldized version of Martin Luther King, because that doesn't gel well, right? But again, we have to control our narratives. So if we control our narratives, we can tell the truth about what really happened, and who was cool with who, and who studied under who, and who worked with whom. All right. And actually, it was SNCC members, such as Kwame Ture, that actually urged King by exposing the contradiction between his nonviolent resistance stance and the violence in the Vietnam War. Because the civil rights movement, it was acceptable for them to keep the critique within the boundaries of the United States. But when you start to become global, then you become a problem. So many people say, well, King delivers his Why I Opposed the War in Vietnam speech in 1967, and then a year later, he's assassinated. Because now, you're really messing with the money now. King talks about the triple evils of racism, militarism, and economic exploitation. And basically, it's very logical. It's like, well, if y'all spend $40 billion on a war in Vietnam to go bully some other people and take their land after the French got beat and couldn't do it on their own, then of course we're going to be starving in the ghettos because we could be using that $40 billion right here. So that's what he's talking about. Later on in that period, after he leaves SNCC or is put out of SNCC, he becomes an honorary prime minister for a brief moment of the Black Panther Party for self-defense in 1968. It's also important that we know that he also ran with Jamil Al-Amin, who is still incarcerated, political prisoner, has an illness, some type of cancer, I believe. I'm not sure what. More famously, his name also used to be H. Rap Brown before he converted to Islam. He changed his name to Jamil Al-Amin. Very important in organizing Black Muslims throughout the country. They were just two bad brothers, like in the 60s. I mean, almost like rock stars. Well, I would liken them to rock stars from what I've studied, except they had a political orientation that was to the benefit of our people. Just like a lot of rappers are kind of lauded and seen as rock stars by our children, but their political orientation is meant to maintain status quo, and it doesn't really go against them. Which also actually is like funny to me because a lot of them are seen as like gangster rappers, and they talk about guns and they talk about being macho and this and that, but they're not confronting anything. They're just maintaining the status quo. That's easy to do. There's nothing tough about it, right? That's that period. So then, okay, toward the last period I talk about is his time on the continent. He relocates or expatriates or migrates back to the continent physically in 1969. Remains there until his physical transition in 1998. And he was originally going to settle in Tanzania, but he gets invited by Osajifo, which means the Great Redeemer, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, to become his political secretary. His political secretary relocates to Guinea. At that point, Kwame Nkrumah, major Pan-Africanist, he's co-president of Guinea along with Akil Parker in Guinea. Relocates there, and as I mentioned earlier, he changed his name in 1978 to Kwame Ture, paying homage to those two men that taught him so much and that gave him so much guidance, Kwame Nkrumah and Akil Ture. So it changes his name from Stokely Carmichael. And just I want to read a couple of excerpts from, as I said, the lecture he delivered in 1970 at Morehouse College entitled Pan-Africanism. Many people have accepted the slogan of Black Power. Some people have tried to make it mean what they want it to mean. The highest political expression of Black Power is Pan-Africanism. Black Power means that all people who are Black should come together, organize themselves, and form a power base to fight for their liberation. That's Black Power. He also talks about Africa. He says Africa is the richest continent in the world. It has all of the mineral resources necessary for the highest technological society in the world today. It has bauxite, copper, zinc, diamonds, gold, oil, ore, cocoa. Man, it's even got peanuts. That's how rich it is. Let me see. One more thing, one or two more things. When we see another quote, when we see an African anywhere in the world, he is not respected because there is no power behind it. And that's why we get to the issue of land. Like when we're connected to a land base, then we have power behind us. All right, I'll stop right there.
All right, thank you very much, brother. That was a lot.